He's the T-Rex of political talk. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
For the balance of the hour, a man who has a very busy schedule, Marc Morano, will be our guest. He served for 3 years as senior advisor and speechwriter and climate researcher for U.S. Senator James Inhofe, Republican Oklahoma, managed the award-winning communications operations of the GOP side of the EPW committee. He joined the Senate Environmental and Public Works Committee as the Majority Communications Director in 2006. After a decade, and has worked as a journalist, documentary maker, radio host, and national television correspondent. Climate Depot it really is the #1 website exposing the attempted takeover of society by big central banks through their rent-a-mob group of communist land grabbers. Now, I want to look at what happened at ClimateGate and the more than 10 huge scandals that have come out since then, each one dwarfing and complementing ClimateGate. Systemic, total, premeditated fraud. The UN knows man isn't hurting the environment with carbon dioxide. They want global government. They want global taxes. They've said it. Now, a key article was written at prisonplanet.com on Friday. I'm asking all listeners to get this out to everybody in your city, your county, because every major city has these crooks working inside of it. Cap and trade scam to be enforced at state level. That's the headline at prisonplanet.com. Individuals and businesses in Austin and a plethora of other states and cities to be taxed for emissions on life-giving gas, carbon dioxide. Now, don't believe me as we go to Marc Morano. Here is solveclimate.com, going carbon neutral, Austin rocks. And they've got the UN in here praising Austin as the biggest cuts in North America, worse than what they've already put in Canada. Okay, taxes on natural gas, taxes on gas, fuel, taxes on your home inspections, brainwashing your kids, huge boondoggles like Spain, $700,000+ per new green job they create, costing 2.2 jobs. Here's KLBJ 590 linking to the Austin City Council. Later, if I have time, I'll play some of this video with the head of Austin Energy saying he wants it, but saying it's good, a $2.6 billion tax in the first 3 years this is implemented. $2.6 billion on Austin electricity payers. You cannot make up this level of evil. Here's another one. Energy plan comes to city council as legislature plans reviews, because the city can't just do whatever it wants and violate state law. Austin Energy unveils carbon calculator at Expo that Austinites will be forced to use. Austin American Statesman. So I wanted to set that up because, yeah, we beat them at the treaty level, but Gordon Brown and Obama said, we don't care. We'll just have our EPAs say it's a toxic waste and start taxing it. The UN's here in Austin. They have open meetings with the UN. They're grabbing ranchers and farmers' property with SOS, not letting them build on it, using the New London Kilo decision. Then later, literally former mayors own banks and take control of the property and become multimillionaires overnight. I mean, it is, I'm living in the Soviet Union. I mean, they are crawling all over us. They hired some special forces black op commander, the statesman said, to run the program. I mean, they got spooks running it because this is about billions of dollars per big city. Marc Morano, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Happy to be here. And I think I have a reason why the UN climate panel has been so inept. If you allow me to read a line here.
Sure, go ahead.
He was overcome by lust and began to feel Sanji's body, caressing her voluptuous breasts. That is what the climate chief of the United Nations has been spending his spare time writing, and that is one of the reasons they've missed all of these basic scandals that have been boiling right underneath him. He's been writing what the UK papers are calling a smutty novel. This is Dr. Vijenda Pachari, who now UK papers, lead authors of the UN, are all asking for his resignation, and they are worried because the people who you just mentioned, some of this globalist agenda, the global governance agenda, having these scandals come out on the heels of ClimateGate, these are all new scandals, by the way, is going to destroy their international agenda. It's going to destroy the domestic agenda, and this is what they've been plotting for decades. This was a poker game. They did all in. All their chips were in. They forgot every other environmental issue, rode this one out to achieve, sort of a status control and global governance, and now they're being forced to bail out, and they are not liking this. And the head of the UN is spending his time writing smutty sex novels. And by the way, it gets creepier. The head of the UN climate panel, Rajendra Pachauri, who, by the way, I debated in 2006 in Kenya, and I called the UN an echo chamber, and he was...
For those that don't know, he looks like Osama bin Laden's older brother.
Well, here's the deal. This book he wrote, Alex, is about a man in a late 60s climate expert betting a bunch of young women, and that's exactly what Pachauri is. So now we may have a hint at what he did with his Nobel Prize-winning prestige that he shared with Al Gore when the award. And by the way, Australian papers, others are now calling for rescinding the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Award, to this UN climate panel. And this is it just grows. Well,
Mark, I want to go over Pachauri Gate, Santer Gate, Glacier Gate, Rainforest Gate. We have just tons of new emails, the fake temperature readings. I mean, literally scandal after scandal, red-handed fraud. Of course, you have the oil for food scammer now hiding in China from indictment. We have Maurice Strong openly saying they want to destroy industrialized society. They want to destroy the middle class. I mean... Is this the beginning of a full rout? Let's go over all the scandals, but then get into the empire striking back. They are still taking over the cities.
I mean, they are. I mean, that's the thing. There's a built-in inertia, like an energy, even after something's dead. There can still be an energy for it. The chicken still runs around immediately after its head's cut off. And so what's happened is they've had decades to lay the landmines, to lay the traps, to lay the strategy. And they have everything from Endangered Species Act to Supreme Court rulings to the EPA declaring, CO2, what we exhale from our own mouth, essentially declaring human beings toxic. They have a favorable ruling there where the EPA could regulate it. They have all sorts of international treaties they can do. They have now Obama setting up a carbon registry in America. And, of course, they have the climate bills lying in wait. They have a host of, and you were mentioning or alluding to some, all across, whether it's the state of California, whether it's cities, regulations coming out our ears, and we have the stoppage of coal plants and carbon-based energy. The most obscene thing, Alex, that has happened here is President Barack Obama, a man of color. I need to say that to remind your listeners, because apparently people like Chris Matthews, that's all they see. But I assume most people aren't as like Chris Matthews, who we have to forget. If Obama gives a great speech, suddenly he forgets he's black, and you might think he's white for a moment. But what Obama has done, most shocking, he's now supporting limiting development in the poverty-stricken third world. Obama's administration is telling the World Bank, not that we're any fans necessarily of the World Bank, but don't fund coal-fired plants in developing countries due to global warming fears. In other words, what little good any international body could ever have would be to help infrastructure and to help bring running water, electricity to people living at the bare level of necessities, to bring modern civilization. President Obama, and this is condemning the majority of people of color, 1.6 billion people, he's condemning people of color to a continued life of backbreaking poverty because
and by the way, Mark, you're not just saying that. They fooled the third world to sign on to the treaty saying we're going to tax America and Europe and England and Australia and give you the money. Then they actually got the Copenhagen Treaty. Then it said they had to make right at double the cuts. It was just shy of double the cuts we do. Every major statistician who studied this says it would make tens of millions more on top of the 15 million kids that starve to death each year, starve to death. If you industrialize the third world, every study shows they will then stop having as many children like Japan, the U.S., England, and everybody else has done, and in fact start having negative overall population growth. The U.S. has a negative growth except for those moving in. They know all of this. It's a pure tool of control, and it's a death sentence. Meanwhile, China builds 3 new giant coal-powered plants a week. We're not building any new ones for those that are being shut down.
And by the way, the farce on China, and you'll hear the left, whether it's New York Times, Tom Friedman, they'll be gloating about China, how they don't have all the democracy restrictions that we do, and how we're going to be left behind fine because they're investing all this and the new green technologies and wind and solar, and they're going to be advanced, and we're going to leave us in the dust. My response to that is if China wants to piss away all their money on failed alternative energy technology years before it's ever ready for mass production, let them. Doesn't mean we need to follow.
But they're not doing it. They built a few.
With China.
They built a few railroads. They're actually going with all the old technology.
They are, but they have a front up where they're investing in alternative energies, and everyone's saying, "Oh, we need to be more like China." We had Tom Friedman actually lamenting that the U.S. and democracies couldn't do what China. He's looking for a benevolent dictator, essentially, the New York Times columnist, because he wants to get these things rammed through. And the democratic...
Mark, you just hit on something. The Chinese called for a global one-child policy at Copenhagen. Every global policy report I read, like this book, Eco-Science, by John P. Holdren, White House Science Czar, says we need a police state like China to carry out forced sterilization.